Good morning. Thank you for joining us at this webinar. My name is Rena Liu Belshi. I'm the Manager of Export Development at the Southwestern Pennsylvania Commission. My coworker Jackie and I have been providing export assistance to small business in Southwest PA region over 20 years. As the Regional Export Network partner, our service is part of the Pennsylvania State's Export Assistance Program. For companies interested in growing their exports, Pennsylvania offers one of the most comprehensive state-sponsored export development programs in the country. We currently have 11 overseas trade offices to cover more than 45 foreign markets. If you would like to learn more about our programs and services, please check the PADCED website. The website is dced.pa.gov. For those of you who are not located in Southwest PA region, Jackie or myself, we will get you connected with our colleagues who cover your region. It's been almost a year since the COVID pandemic. Everything has been interrupted and changed. Selling your products or services to foreign countries has been facing new challenges. With the travel restrictions, it's almost impossible to meet with your customers, distributors, or to attend trade events physically. So, virtual meetings, online marketing, e-commerce all become necessary method of doing business. So what is online marketing? How does it work effectively for small companies? I'm sure we all would like to learn more about it. That's what this webinar is for. A couple of months ago, we did a session on this topic and received positive feedbacks. So we are doing this again and hope more companies can learn to use the new technologies for exports. Our program also offers a grant funded by Small Business Administration called the Global Access Program, or GAP grant. The grant can be used for covering expenses like web internationalization, e-commerce, online marketing, and many other export-related activities. I will let Jackie to give you more details about it. Yes, Jackie.
Good morning. Thanks, Rena. Good morning, everyone. As Rena mentioned, part of the State Export Assistance Program, we have something that is very good to help small businesses increase their exports or take the next step over, which is the Global Access Program grant, which is a small grant that we have to offer small businesses. Just because of the time restrictions, it's going to seem like I'm going to run very fast through the presentation, but please, I would encourage that after, if anybody has any questions related to this, feel free to either contact us. I'm sure our information will be available after the program. Like Rena said, the Global Access Grant is a grant funded by the SBA via the State Trade and Export Expansion Program. Basically, it's a small grant that would cover about 75% of expenses. Next slide, please. Due to the pandemic, GAP goes through a fiscal year. Usually it starts in October and ends in September the following year. Just because of things having been restricted, we are very fortunate right now that we're running basically 2 GAP years. So we still have funds under GAP 8, which started in 2019, and GAP 9, which started in 2020. SBA was nice to us in terms of extending the deadline for all these funds till 2021. So we have until September of this year, to use all these funds. Next slide, please. Again, before COVID, there were restrictions on limitations as to how much you could use for each one of the items. After April of last year, those caps were advanced so that we could use more funding toward things that we're able to do with all the restrictions that we had. And something very interesting that happened was that through efforts from the office in Pennsylvania, the Department of Community Economic Development and the OIBD, they were able to have communications with SBA. So GAP 9 right now, we are able to use up to $10,000, which before our cap was total of $5,000 per company per year. Under step 9, we have increased that number to $10,000, which is very good for companies to be able to go to the next step and use in whatever efforts they might need to try to continue their exports. Next slide. Some of the eligible activities, and goes very close to what the presentation will be today, is talking about e-commerce, digital marketing, search engine optimizations, and things as such. I'm not going to go in detail on all the stuff that it says there in the presentation, as you will have a copy of that. And like I said, for time purposes, we want to give most time to Justin to go over all this information. Next slide. Some of the other things that are covered under GAP are international travel. So when we're able to travel, it would cover overseas trade missions, trade shows, marketing sales trips, and things as such. One other thing, as Rena had mentioned in the beginning of the presentation, the state of Pennsylvania has 11 offices, which are there to assist Pennsylvania companies. Anywhere we don't have an office, a lot of companies use the services from the Department of Commerce. GAP can help you offset the cost from those services that you receive from the Department of Commerce that might have a price attached to it. Next slide. Some of the other things that we can use GAP for are compliance testings. A lot of companies, you know, you have a lot of certifications that you have to comply with. And nowadays, a lot of the virtual events. The way GAP is something for small businesses to help them offset their costs. So basically, in this particular case, to use GAP through the state of Pennsylvania, you have to be a Pennsylvania business at least for a year. You have to qualify with the small business requirements. And the state is divided in 10 different regions. So anybody in the state of Pennsylvania has a local person that you can contact who will help you, guide you through the process of applying through this GAP grants if you would be interested in that. And next slide, please. Here's just a breakdown on how the state is divided. So wherever your offices are, you will have a contact. At the bottom of this slide, we have a link where we get you to the right person depending on your region. Again, it's a simple, it looks like a cumbersome process, but once you sit down with somebody that can help you and guide you through the process, it's not that difficult. The biggest focus is whatever activity you're going to be applying for, it must have some kind of an international content. Again, because of the time, and we want to give most time to Justin to help us understand what we can do and how we are able to expand our efforts internationally. That's all I'm going to say in terms of the presentation, and I would like to turn this on to Justin. My contact and Rena's contact is at the end of the presentation. Next slide, please. That'll be just our contact information, and I will be glad to talk to anybody. I mean, send questions, emails are there. And if not in the Southwestern Pennsylvania region, I'll be able to help you out, connect with the right person in the state. Thank you very much for your time. Justin, I'd like to turn it on to you so that we can learn more about tactics to increase our sales.
Awesome. Thank you, Jack. So I know it's not a good thing to do generally, starting a presentation with something negative, but I'm sorry, this is difficult. You see, anytime I do a presentation on export marketing, I think back to a business trip that I took down to Costa Rica a few years ago. My wife accompanied me, and that's where she met this animal is really is the nicest word that I can use. And we're all together, and she's laughing. He's making her laugh, and then he even starts groping her like I wasn't even there. But fortunately, I was lucky, and I recorded, and I have proof. So here's the example. We're in Costa Rica. And one of the things, you know, as an exporter is you get these awesome opportunities to travel. Hopefully we'll be able to do these things again one day and do things like feed bananas to the monkeys. So hi, as Jackie mentioned, Justin Seibert with Direct Online Marketing. I'm going to go through extremely quickly on who I am and who we are, just to give you background. We because we have a chock full presentation of a lot of information that I'm hopeful is useful to you, that you can take today to start improving your exporting, even in this market where travel is restricted right now. I've been doing this now for 20 years, and I founded this agency 15 years ago. We're one of Google's top 200 partners in the world, and what we do really, really well is drive quality traffic to our clients' websites. I would just like to point out that even though we've helped our clients sell to over 150 countries around the world, we're exporters too. So we've sold to every populated continent. We've been fortunate to win Exporter of the Year. We've received Export Achievement Certificates, not just for the work that we do to help our clients, but for our exporting services ourselves. Give you an idea of some of the clients that we work with. Typically, we work with a medium-sized business that is in a very niche area where they're very good at what they do. It might be the leading company in that niche. They might be the challenger brand within that niche. And then we help them increase their sales through web. The last thing I just would mention about us, if you want to learn more, and we'll make these slides available, is to check us out on G2, on Clutch, on Google. These are all places where you can see what people have to say about working with us, what they like about us, what they don't like about us, and you can get some unfiltered reviews that way. All right, that's it. Let's get into the presentation now. First, the more we make this interactive, the better. So thank you, first of all, to everybody that submitted some questions ahead of time. We're going to do our best to address those through the presentation that we're giving. But at any time that you have a question, what I'd recommend is that you use the chat button. That way, Luke Mays, who's in our office, a digital strategist, he's going to be filtering out those questions, and he'll interrupt me at various points to ask those questions on your behalf. He also has an idea of what our slides are. So in some cases, he's going to be holding those until later on in the presentation or till the end of the presentation. I have a lot of slides. We may not even get through everything or be able to get through everything in detail. So I would rather spend more time on a section if it's of interest to you, and we can always, again, send the slides out to everybody and follow up and share more information with you. This is your presentation. You're giving us an hour right now. I want to make it as valuable as possible. All right, let's start with an overview of digital marketing and make sure we're all on the same page. I like to think of this acronym to figure out what do we need to do, where do we start when we're putting together our focus area. And so it always starts with the strategy we're going to go after. How are we going to execute against that? Analysis is why I fell in love with digital marketing when I started doing this 20 years ago, is because we can actually see what's working and what's not working. And then finally, the biggest piece of this is testing. This is not a set it and forget it kind of situation. You want to constantly be trying new things out because you're going to get such quick feedback. And again, you'll see what's working and what's not working. On the strategy side, where do you start? Well, the first thing is always your goals. And, what are those things that you're trying to accomplish? And also add in your audience, who you're going after. That's going to help you understand geographically or in terms of what platforms you want to be on, what your approach is. The more information you know, not just about the company, but the individuals or the personas that you're trying to reach, the more effectively you can craft that strategy. Obviously, the geography, and we'll give you some tips on how you might be able to find geographic areas that make sense for you. Understand what that competition looks like in each market. And then once you have all of that, then you can start getting into the specific tactics that you want to go after. We're going to go through a few today that we think make sense for you, and then figure out that testing. What are you going to do so that you're constantly moving forward? As my old German teacher used to say, there is no such thing as staying neutral. You're only moving forward or you're moving backwards. Now, really, that acronym I use, SEAT, should probably be SATE because execution should come at the end, but I thought SEAT was a better word, easier to remember. So we're going to come back to this, and it just gave me an excuse to pull out a picture from Thor Ragnarok. All right, so hang tight. Now, from an analysis standpoint, what should you analyze? We're going to give you some examples of it, but you need to analyze this, and you need to analyze that. There's so much data that you can find, and it's easy to get lost. If you have Google Analytics, if you've dived in there and you've taken a look, you can see that you can get overwhelmed with it. So I want to pare down to some of the slides that I think are most important for you from a leadership perspective or a sales leader perspective or from a marketing, like a CMO type perspective. What's the information that you need to focus on? Now, very first thing is starting with analytics. I'd recommend Google Analytics. It's a free program, but you can use whatever you'd like. But if you don't already have analytics on your website, this is your stop, do not pass go. Go directly to Google Analytics, sign up. It's a free account. You give a little bit of code over to your web developers, they put it on, and then you start getting the data. But the reason you want to start this today, if you don't already have it, is analytics can't tell you what happened to your site and its visitors before you put that code on. So it's important to get it on as soon as possible so that even if you're not ready to start looking at the data, it'll start collecting it for you. One of the areas that you want to look at, it'll give you an idea of geography. Where are your visitors coming from all over the world? And it'll drill down into the country level, and in many cases into the state or region level, and then even beyond that into the city level. And I love this so you can see whether your efforts are working. And this is great right now when you're out there trying to reach out, and we'll talk about those different ways that you can do that. But it's also really great when you're back in the real world and we're able to travel and do all of these types of things, or if you're just trying to check on the efforts of your distributors and seeing how impactful they are for you. Because you can then see, are people in these areas actually checking us out to learn more? One thing I'd recommend very highly is to think about how your site appears on mobile. Understand that people, even more so than in the United States, even though in the United States it's growing, people are using the mobile version. They're checking you out on their cell phones. So you take a look, you can actually see in this case how many people are looking, and you can do a filter by country, or you can go to the country section, do a filter by mobile, which is what we're doing here. Why is it so important? Well, you know, I've been doing a presentation, some variation of this for 12 years now. And I used to say mobile is coming, mobile is coming. Well, that hasn't been the case for a while. Mobile's here. And a couple stats that are important for you to consider. The first is that 75% of purchases happen on multiple devices. So people start on their cell phone, they might go to a desktop, come back to a laptop. Majority of cases, it's not just a one-stop shop thing. But the scarier one, the one that you really need to pay attention to, is that nearly half of people, 48% of people that visit your site on mobile and can't quickly find what they're looking for will never return to your site. And we spend so much time and so much effort and so much money to get people to visit, to come learn about us. We can't afford to have half those people never come back. Two tools I'd recommend you to check out if you want to see how your site performs. And these are both free tools, and you can just Google them up. Google Page Speed Insights and Pingdom. Both great tools for you to use. And the question you need to ask yourself is, would you buy from you? And I'd ask everybody right now to pull out your cell phone and pull up your website and think that if you weren't associated with your company, would you be willing to do this? Is it easy to navigate? Are the words big enough to see? Can you find the information that you're looking for? Is it a good experience? And I like doing this when I'm actually live in front of people and I can see everybody's faces, because you can see some people look okay, and then you can see some very furrowed brows, and they start taking notes about some bad experiences they're having. So please take a look at your website either right now or soon after this webinar, and just make sure you're delivering a great experience to your visitors. There are a lot of stats out there. Amazon, over a decade ago, found that for every 10th of a second slower that their site loaded, they lost 1% of sales. Huge number if you're Amazon, but none of us can afford to lose that. A more recent stat here is from Google, and they're saying that for your site, if it takes, instead of 1 second to load, if it takes 3 seconds to load, that means a person is 30% more likely to leave the site. Visit one page and leave. That's what a bounce rate is that you see here. It's a bad thing in the majority of cases. And if it goes from 1 second to 5 seconds, it almost doubles the chances that they'll leave. So if you're looking for general benchmarks of how quickly your site should load, I would answer faster than whatever it is right now. I always want it to be faster, but I really think that 3 second mark is really what you need to be under. I'd love to see you under 2 seconds, but for some industries, for some websites, like if you're a big e-commerce website, sometimes getting it down too low is really difficult to do. But if you go back to those tools I mentioned before, Page Speed Insights and Pingdom, they're going to give you some great tips on what you can do to make your site faster. Another section of analytics that you want to look at, you can look at what is the information that people are viewing. So what's the most popular content? And you can also filter this by region. So you can see within that region, what do they actually care about? And in most cases, in many cases, it's not what you think is most important. So you can take a look at this and then figure out what do you need to do to give them more of the information that they're looking for, and more of the information, especially that you want them to find, so that they are hopefully more likely to take an action and contact you or to make a purchase. The big thing that you need to set up in analytics, and I just was talking with a prospect yesterday that didn't have this set up, which I was shocked by because they were doing so many other things well. You can set up conversions. And a conversion or a goal, it's called a goal in analytics. In advertising, it's called conversion, mean the same thing. All it means is a person taking the action that you want them to take. So whether that's a purchase, whether that's signing up for a newsletter, whether that's filling out a form to contact you, whatever those actions are that you want them to take, downloading a video or a PDF, looking up directions, initiating a live chat, you can track all of these things to see how impactful your marketing, your advertising efforts are. This is a critical step. And you think about what to measure, and these are things for you to track outside of analytics. To me, there's two categories of things that you absolutely have to know. The first is return on investment. So what are your costs associated with what you're doing? Maybe that's a hard advertising dollar. Maybe it's just your hours and the costs that are associated with people working those hours. But however you're going to classify those costs, what's the return you're getting? So what are those sales that you're ultimately getting? And what are those sales valued at? But especially if you're in a lead generation standpoint, people are not purchasing directly online, that can take a really long time and can sometimes get a little bit trickier to measure. So we also want to track cost per different stages of your sales funnel. Frank the Tank here to give us tips here. And so you'd start with leads, so the person contacting you. Okay, well, that's great. We know that if a person filled out on a form on our website, we want to know how often that happened, what the cost was. We also, and I'm going to use a couple jargony type terms, but I'll explain what they mean. We'd also look at what's called a marketing qualified lead. You might use slightly different terminology in your organization. So not just that they filled out a form, but through lead scoring or some other factor, is this somebody that's actually worth talking with, as opposed to maybe somebody pitching you on your website and not really looking for your services or products. You then move on down to something like a sales qualified lead, where sales has said, yes, this person meets our budget and authority and need qualifications that we're looking for. You take it to the next level of an opportunity created. So you actually, this is something that you're working. Maybe you're putting through a proposal there, and then ultimately have you close the business. So this is where I find most companies fall short, is they're not tracking the cost per lead or the cost per opportunity or the cost per MQL. They're not doing that all the way through the funnel. So if you are in a position where you're not doing straight e-commerce on your website, this is maybe the most important piece of advice I would give in this webinar, is to start tracking that information. And I'll pause for a second so I can drink some water, but also see if anybody has questions about this, because I don't want to lose anyone here. All right, so moving on. And again, if you want, you can type out questions. We can come back to it at a later point. Testing. By the way, don't show this to anybody in my office. This was obviously something I worked up and not somebody that designed for me. But I fell in love with digital marketing because I could measure everything and I could test. And you need to be doing that on a regular basis. And it's all going to be based on your goals. And so when you start with these goals, by the way, I know we have people from across the state of Pennsylvania and some people from outside as well. I chose to use a picture of Sidney Crosby scoring on the Flyers. I know we have some fans from Philly here that would point out that even though he did that, we got whooped the first 2 games of the season. I just like to pretend that didn't happen. So thank you for your playing along with my fantasy here. When we think about these goals, we always want to start with real world. Sometimes people think about, hey, I just want to get more likes, or can I get more shares on my Instagram story? Those are great. They can matter. We'll talk about that. But last time I checked, you can't take a Twitter retweet down to the bank and cash that in. So we want to start with, what are those KPIs that are most important to you? Sales, leads, those things you're tracking in the real world. You'll then look at intermediary metrics so that we can see how are people moving along that path. So it might be things like sharing a story or liking something. It might be a keyword ranking within Google. It might be something like how much time they're spending on site. Those are all good things to know so you can see how your progress is coming along. But at the end of the line, you want to make sure that you're measuring everything. Now with conversion rate optimization, it's simply what do you want to happen? How do you get that to happen more often? We're going to spend a lot of time in this presentation going over how are you going to get more people to your site, more quality traffic. But we tend to spend less time as marketers on how can we get more out of the traffic that is coming. So if you can just make a movement, think about taking 1% of your traffic becoming a lead or making a sale, and can you make it 1.5%? That's a 50% improvement on the return you're getting out of your website without sending any more traffic there. It's a really important concept. It means that you're going to get better returns. And there's two keys. There's actually some pretty wild scientific formulas out there to determine how you should think about it. But they boil down to two primary things. The first is how do you increase incentive? And the analogy I like to use is if you were giving away, and I believe you, a Brinks truck full of gold bars, and it's going to be sent to my home, I'll fill out what you want me to do on your website. I'll give you my kids' social security numbers. But most of us aren't offering something that valuable. So what are the ways that we can reduce friction? And those are all the things that make it harder for a person to purchase. I'm going to give you some examples of that. We want to always make it more likely that they want to reach out, less likely that there are things in their way, there are obstacles in their way from doing that. Now, e-commerce, so these are people selling directly online. We're looking for an ideal shopping cart experience. I'm not sure this is the ideal shopping cart experience, but nonetheless, we move on. Single page checkout is best practice these days. There was a long time where people had to go through multiple steps. You'd fill out your information, then you put in your shipping information, then you'd move on from there. You want to collect all of that information in one section whenever possible. Also allow guest purchases. I typically say just try to model what Amazon does. They've put so much money into this, they know what they're doing. They don't allow guest purchases anymore, but they're in the position they don't need to. So I would say still as a best practice, if you want to have it so people can register, come back, have their information already in there. If you're a repeat purchase kind of business, that's great, but always make it so that they don't have to fill out a form and create an account first. There are also some options where you can have fields auto-filled based on their information from the computer, or for example, putting in a zip code, then it'll put in a city and a state. Make sure this is mobile friendly. And then this is really critical. This is what the Scooby-Doo gang would call a clue because it's written in a different color. You want to make sure that you're offering multiple different payment methods. This is absolutely critical when you're selling overseas. So when you're looking at something like Alipay, you want to look for those options. What's being used in their markets, and set those up if it makes financial sense for you in any case that you can, because the more ways you make it easy for them to pay however they're comfortable paying, the more success you're going to have. Also recommend showing shipping costs up front. We've all had that experience where you're going along, you have something in your head, maybe it's free shipping or you don't think it's going to be that bad. You go through the entire process, then you get hit with an enormous shipping fee and you say, screw it, I'm out. Don't do that. You want to get the information to them up front. And finally, and this is just a general rule, we're going to come back to this on the next slide, ask for as little information as possible. If you don't need the information to complete a transaction, all you're going to do is make it less likely they're going to purchase from you when you ask for it. Landing pages. So these are best practices when you're looking to drive leads and you don't have that e-commerce functionality on your website. So always recommend that you use a standalone landing page. Don't just send traffic to your homepage. Don't just send traffic to interior pages of your website. Create a page that's meant for conversion. And so that means things like removing your main navigation. You can still give them the option of going through your website, but really downplay that. You've paid for this traffic to come to this page, to come to your website. You want to get the highest amount of people actually converting on that. Ask for as little information as needed. What happens a lot of times is we ask for all this information because it's going to make our lives easier, right? We want to be able to give this information over to our sales team. You need to flip the mindset if that's what you're thinking about. How can you make your potential client's life easier? And you're asked for as little information as possible with one exception. An exception is a questions box. So when the person actually has that box that says, how can we help you, or questions, and you make it really big so they can fill out information, that's the one box, that's the one additional piece of information you can ask for that will actually lead to increased conversion rates. So I recommend in most cases you do that. Also allow multiple ways to contact. All of us on this webinar have different ways we like to talk to people. Some will always pick up a phone. Some are always going to do live chat when that's an option. Some people like to email, send out a form. Some people like to text. The more ways that you can allow people to contact you, the higher your conversion rates are going to be. Always use a true call to action. I hate that gray submit button. Please don't use that. Actually use the call to action there. And keep your forms and the buttons, the submit buttons, above the fold so the person doesn't have to scroll down. And then whatever you can do, you want to make sure that the person has all the information they need to feel confident that you have a solution to their problems and that they can find it all there on that page. So things like testimonials, credibility seals, numbers supporting you, case studies, all the information that you can add there on that landing page is only going to help you out. Let me pause 1 second. I'll get some more water. Luke, I see the chat box blowing up. I don't know if there's any questions you think we should address right now or not.
Not blowing up, but we definitely do have one question. And if you're able to field it, it'd be very helpful. So the question is, for industrial/commercial products, what are the payment types recommended? And the specific person asking the question is offering credit cards, the ability to purchase through credit cards, and occasionally the ability to purchase through PayPal. And then, apologies, there's a correction here. They do accept credit cards and purchase orders. They do not they do not currently accept PayPal. So again, the main question, which might be in the weeds, you might want to keep this one for down the road, is going to be, for industrial/commercial products, what are the payment types that you would recommend or key in on?
Yeah, it's a great question. So we'll talk about e-commerce. Obviously, we're not talking about letters of credit and all of those types of things. Great things that the SBA offers, great things that XM Bank potentially can help you with as well. We'll focus on the online experience because I think that's what it's asking. If you're already taking credit cards, because to me, that's the demarcation line. So if you are taking those purchases online, then I think it comes down to what in that geographic area that you're reaching out to, do you want to add on to that? So like if you're going to China, you absolutely want to be on Alipay, for example. I think you absolutely want to be on PayPal. So take a look at those. Happy to give some more recommendations of different ones, especially when you understand what the different regions you're trying to reach. In Scandinavia, it might be something like Klar. So it just really depends on those factors. But I would start, since we're talking to somebody based in the US, presumably, I would highly look at PayPal as a start. So thanks, Luke, for that, and for whoever asked that question. Going in, these are the tactics that we want to drive into right now. And so how can we get more traffic to our website? And we'll start talking about search engines. So the benefit, the primary value of search engines is it's about intent. Unlike TV, radio, billboard, social media, all these things can be great for you. It's an entirely different model. You're reaching people that are actively looking for what you're offering. And you've seen a screen like this a million times. You can see these results are in Spanish. It's the same Google in the US versus Latin America versus South Korea versus Zimbabwe. All looks the same, right? They all have their own individual country versions of Google, but you're going to see those ads at the top, pay-per-click ads. And you're going to see the listings underneath have a lot of different names: natural listings, organic listings, search engine optimization, or SEO. Those are in essence what Google thinks are the best results for that person's search. And you are not paying Google to show up there. You have to make your site search engine friendly to be able to show up there. Now, the good news is, I'll talk about Google, but think of Google synonymously here with search engines. It's the #1 search engine in all but 4 countries around the world. In China, Baidu's #1. In Russia, it's Yandex. In Korea, I've seen some different stats about this, but I believe Naver still is #1. I've seen some other stats that say Google's overtaken it, but Naver's still very popular. In Japan, Yahoo Japan. But everywhere else, Google's #1 in the world. And really, you can get coverage because Google is used pretty much everywhere in the world that you're allowed to sell to from the United States with the exception of China. Big firewall there. Google pulled out several years ago. I think they're going to go back in someday, but they haven't done it yet. So right now, China is the one thing that's a little bit different, that you wouldn't be able to get that exposure with Google. That is something that whether you look at Shenma or 360 or Baidu, you'd look at those search engines to get coverage there. So we'll start talking about SEO. So those organic listings you're not paying Google for. And why do we care, right? There's a few benefits. First is it's very targeted. We talked about you're reaching people looking for what you're selling, and you're not paying for those clicks. But this third one is one that it took me a long time to understand how critically and important it is for businesses, because I got that feedback when I talk with people. And really, Google provides you a sense of legitimacy. So if you're not showing up when somebody's searching for your name, that's danger Will Robinson territory. But if you're not showing up when somebody's searching for what you sell, that starts to put questions in their mind about how legitimate of a business you are. And this is, I know what drives businesses crazy sometimes, is that you will have, I hear things like, it's two guys in their basement and we've been around for 100 years and they're showing up and we're not. Why is Google so stupid? But people are using that as legitimacy. So no matter what the real world is like, that's what they're seeing. So having that presence is really going to help you out. It is a very long-term type of thing. It takes a while to get good results in SEO, but they last a long time, and you can see how well it's working. Now we think about how does SEO work, and I'm gonna give you the super Cliff Notes version. This is something I sometimes spend 2 hours on. It's based on keywords. So you can't just say, I want to show up in Google. You have to say, I want to show up in Google for these particular keywords that I'm going after. And Google has a giant formula. They like to call it an algorithm, hundreds of variables, and they change those variables more than once per day. But I think it's helpful to think of them into two categories. And the first is authority. And these are things like, well does your site perform on mobile? Does it load quickly? Are there errors on the site? What content are you talking about on your site? Is that content optimized towards certain keywords? But Google wants to be able to have kind of independent third-party verification of the quality of your site as well. So they look for signs of credibility, which are primarily based on how people talk about you off the web. So that can be something like getting your company mentioned in the New York Times, but really the best thing you can get is when there are other sites out there linking back to you. Because if they're doing that, they're in essence vouching for you and saying that you have a good source of information for their visitors. Hallmark of this, if you want to start with SEO, you can get really far just starting with this first concept, and that's how do you create awesome, valuable content for your audience. So you're writing the content that users care about and that provides them value. Even if you think you're in a non-sexy industry, people come to you for your expertise. They value the knowledge that you have. So how can you create value around what they need to know? And you want to write a lot of information. Don't just jam it stuff with that isn't necessary, but put good information that goes into more detail than what the competition does. But at the end of the day, what you have to ask yourself is, would you read it and share it yourselves? And for example, I'm a big fan of blogging. I think it works great. It can help you from an SEO perspective. It can help you just in general with your site and visitors. But I know so many companies that get into blogging for SEO purposes, and they don't like doing it, and they just feel like they're beating their head against a wall because they don't want to do it. They don't want to write, but they feel like it's their day to write and post a blog. So don't get into that for that reason. Think about it from the perspective of adding value. And if you're able to do that on a consistent basis, then a blog can be great for you. If not, just think about how you can add value on your website.
Hey, Justin, I'm gonna jump in here while you're drinking some water. I don't know. I'm still waiting on a response back. Just some general stuff that you might want to speak to regarding Q&A. First one is from a SaaS-centric organization. They're saying this is great. Sort of a general overview of how to sell products online. Is there any specific information around recommendations for software as a service? I think I know the answer to this question already. I just wanted to throw it out there so you at least comment while Chris is still on here with us for feedback.
Yeah, I appreciate it. So we're industry agnostic. We worked with dozens of industries. SaaS is actually our biggest industry. So we do the most work there. Happy to give you some very specific examples. What I would say is where we've had the most success is with Google and LinkedIn. And we're going to get to LinkedIn here in a second. and we'll give some specific tips around that. I'd say the piece that's most important and most lacking as a general rule about how do we use the internet to drive more SaaS sales is that measurement of the funnel. And I see so many companies falling down. In fact, I'm giving a presentation here next month to a group of SaaS CMOs, and that's maybe a third of my presentation is just going into that kind of analytics. So I would say Google, SEO and PPC, and LinkedIn are my three biggest things. I would recommend email that we'll get to here at the end of the presentation, but that analytics piece is absolutely critical.
Awesome. And last question, this one may be a little in the weeds, but just one on shipping costs. Do shipping costs include custom duties?
So that comes, that's something that you have to figure out on your own, how you're going to be able to do it. It's an awesome question.
Sure.
But you would want to be able to calculate those in there so that people understand, does it include customs? Does it not include customs? And make sure you're very clear on the website about what you're going to do. It's a lot more work if you're going to calculate those customs options in there yourself. That's the type of situation too, where it might be better to be able to give the people information as a lead and say, well, this is the general cost, but there's going to be costs on customs and everything else. And then you're treating it as a lead situation as opposed to a full e-commerce situation where you can then take the person offline and answer those questions for them is probably what I recommend in that situation. So thanks. And thanks everyone for the questions. Keep them coming. I'll also mention Google Local. There's a lot of different ways you can do it. I pulled up here an example of Google My Business, where you can see, is the business owned? If you're doing a search, for example, for a company's name and a location, in this case, our name of our company, Direct Online Marketing in Pittsburgh, this will trigger and pull up. But there's a lot of different things that you can do, whether you can claim a physical location outside of the country or not. If you can, you absolutely want to do this. It's free. There's other types of directories that you can get in. Happy to go in more detail if that's important for people. But the other thing you can do is if you have distributor relationships, you should be talking about those places and their locations and where they serve on your website so that you can claim that and start throwing out some signals to Google that you do have a presence, albeit not a direct one, but a presence in those countries, in those cities. A few exporting tips for you on the SEO side of things. So you want to decide on the format that you're looking for. So a separate domain, samplecompany.com versus awesomecompany.com, or a subdomain, sample.company.com versus that sample part being at the end, or subdirectory, which would be company.com/sample. And I'm happy to get in the weeds. That might be something to follow up on at the very end about the benefits of each of those. Generally speaking, I'd love to have all the content on the same site if ever possible, and then use subdirectories these days. But there's, again, it's situational. You do want to use, this is very in the weeds, happy to talk about, something called hreflang tags. That's a way that search engines use to categorize your information. So it's something you do on the back end in the code. You can talk to your developers about how you can put that onto your site, but you're able to give them information about this section of your site is specifically meant for people from this country and for this language. You can also share this information with Google Search Console. It's free. You should absolutely sign up for this. It used to be called Google Webmaster Tools. They're one and the same, just went through a rebrand. Anytime you can build links, we talked about those credibility signals from within the country. So from sites based in that country, even better. And then, we're a big fan of using translation partners, people that can actually translate and localize. But when you do that, you sometimes then need to go back and optimize the content for the keyword afterwards, or at least give them the rules. If you have a great relationship with them, tell them the keyword that you're going after and why it's important to you and where you want it to show up, and they can work with you on that front. On the PPC side, so this is very quick. What can we do? We can drive traffic. You could have ads up today in any country around the world. And you're going to only pay for action because your person has to first type in something related to what you sell so that your ad appears. At that stage, you're not paying anything. And then they have to look at all the information on the screen, decide that you have the information they're looking for. And at that point is the only time that you pay anything to Google. And you have budgets so you control how much you're spending. You know what works and doesn't work. There's tremendous amounts of data out there, and it's really made for testing. These are the platforms that you would look at. So in the United States, Google Ads is #1 by far. If you're having success in Google, you would then move on to Microsoft advertising to get ads up on Bing, on Yahoo, on DuckDuckGo. Outside of the country, then again, you might be looking at Baidu, Yandex, Naver, Yahoo Japan, some of those platforms. You can target based on factors related to time of day of week, down to demographics about the person, and then you get the results in almost real time. You have those results come in immediately. Conversions might take an hour or so to populate, but you're going to see what's working and what's not. Factors that are really important are landing pages. So we talked a little bit about the landing pages before. What are those factors that are really critical? Also want to look at analytics. Recommend that you use Google Tag Manager. If you are selling e-commerce directly online, you can set up enhanced e-commerce tracking to actually measure and to show the revenue that you've received directly within analytics. And if you're advertising, this is a big one. Google's been working on machine learning for years and years and years, and it was something that we tried to avoid for a long time because the results weren't great. But now that they've been doing it for so long, they're starting to improve. So there are ways that you can allow the Google system to go out and find more of what you're looking for. And we'd recommend taking advantage of that. And I'm happy to provide specific examples. And then finally, constant monitor and testing. I always like to say the best thing about Google is they created this amazing advertising platform that anybody could go in without an agency and just put in a credit card and go to town. And the worst thing about Google is they created this amazing advertising platform that anybody could go into without an agency, put in a credit card and go to town. And I'm not saying you need an agency. What I am saying is you need to monitor constantly. We had a defense lawyer, military defense lawyer, come to us to audit his account because he wasn't getting the results he was looking for. And he was advertising on a term DOHA, Defense Office of Hearing and Appeals, is what it meant to him. Makes sense. It was a valid term. But as some of you world scholars will know, DOHA means other things, including the capital of gutter. And when we audited his account, he had spent over $10,000 on straight up Arabic searches, even though he was only advertising in the United States, looking for things like best falafel shop in Qatar, or excuse me, in Doha. So again, you have to go in there and test it constantly. Don't just put in the credit card, set it and forget it.
Justin, I think it's a great interjection spot for a question we have from the audience here. Just something we may want to discuss it during Q&A, but it's what are some top tactics that you'd recommend in terms of keyword ranking in other countries outside of translating your page?
Yeah, so so when they say keyword ranking, I'm assuming the person's talking about the natural rankings or search engine optimization. So following general best practices, that's going to be things, and I apologize that I'm not going to have enough time to go into as much depth as I would like today. I'm happy to offline answer questions directly with this person, but it is the things like choosing what keywords are most important to you, creating great content on a specific page around those keywords, making sure that they're used within title tags and meta descriptions and alt tags on images. And I apologize, I'm going through very quickly, just trying to answer from a high level. Making sure the site is error-free, making sure that it is loads quickly. It's a great experience on mobile. And then from an outside the country perspective, it's great if you are doing this in the foreign language. And then if you have those things that we talked about from Google Search Console, where you're telling Google that this is meant for this particular country and language, and then you can build links from other sites in that country and language. Those are all things from a high level that can help and are things I would look into. And to that point, Luke, I'm speaking very quickly because I'm trying to wrap up as much as I can here. Everybody, this presentation will be made available to you. So you can always go back through the recording, put me on half speed to listen and pause and go back through this. Or again, happy to talk with people and give you more information. With PPC exporting, we like testing country by country to see what will work. There are some times you might want to throw it out there and then refine from there, but we ultimately want to see which countries are most profitable for you. Make sure you're matching your website language to the ad language that you're going after. So what you don't want to do is advertise, have a keyword search in English or keyword search in French. You write an ad in French, then they come to your website and it's in English. It's okay to do an ad in English and a landing page in English on that, but the ad and the landing page have to match. If you don't have a foreign language site, think about just creating a landing page. If you're able to handle the inquiry, if you have people there that can speak the language. If you don't, think about how you can leverage distributors. One French client that we work with, we run campaigns primarily in French, English, German, and Spanish. But there's also a little bit of Russian, and they don't have a full version of their website in Russian. All they have is a landing page. They don't deal with those leads at all. They don't have those capabilities in-house. What they're doing is just collecting that lead information, sending it directly to the distributor. So that's always an option you can look at as well. And this is one I love. So if you are an e-commerce site and you are advertising, think about driving them to what I'd call a split page, where what you're trying to do is get them to fill out information. If they're a bigger company, they're going to do a bigger order, right? They're probably not going to place a $500,000 order online, but they're going to reach out to you, going to talk about terms and everything else. So how can you get it most likely that they're going to contact you? But you also make it show some products. Click here to view our entire catalog and purchase directly online. So if they are looking for onesie twosies, you're not turning them away, and they're able to do that as well. If you sign up for a Google Ads account, you get, and that's free, by the way, you have to put in a credit card, but it doesn't cost you any money. You get access to their keyword planner, and it'll allow you to do a keyword research and show you what kind of volume people are looking for there. You can either put in keywords or put in your website or put it in a competitor's website, and it gives you a lot of data from there. For example, it'll actually show you what the potential volume is on average per month in different countries. So if you're really trying to see what kind of volume is available, is this a market that potentially has makes sense for us? This is a great way to get that data. In social media, the benefit is that you're able to reach people based on where they spend their most time. So if you're going after a professional demographic and that country has a good LinkedIn population, that's a great place to go. If you're on the B2C side of things, you might be looking at Facebook or Instagram or another platform like Snap or something like that. Now, the benefits of it is you have people where they spend all of their time and you're able to target them based on what their demographics are. So it's not intent like search engines, but it's what do they like. You can target demographics, their behaviors, and Facebook, just like with Google, you can actually start to get estimates by putting in details about who you're trying to reach, location, age, gender, what they're interested in, language, and it'll tell you how many people you can potentially reach with your ads. LinkedIn, the benefit is you can target people based on the company size, the industry, the person's job title, the seniority level, where they are active on LinkedIn. And the big thing to know with LinkedIn, we're huge proponents of it. We think it can work great, but it doesn't work without a great content strategy. So you have to give valuable content that people are interested in. So that can be a white paper, an infographic, how-to articles, webinars, guides, anything that adds value can help. Just like with Facebook and with Google, you can also put in information to LinkedIn to get an idea of the target audience size. I will say this is a little bit wonky. It really tends to be more about what kind of budget numbers you put in there, and you'll see that target audience size a change. It's a bug in the feature that I'd like to see get improved at some point, but it still gives you a sense of what you can actually reach with LinkedIn. A few things to think about. So think about, do you want to have separate accounts based on the country that you're going after, based on the language that you're going after? We'll talk about reviews in a second. And then I'd really recommend, even though social media is free, I'd highly recommend that if this is going to be a big thing for you, you think about finding an agency probably in that market that knows the culture really well to be able to help you with posting. Display ads, you can have banners show up throughout the web. There's a lot of different ways you can reach people, including based on email lists that you upload. But one of the things that I'm a really big fan of is retargeting. So those ads that follow you around after you leave a website, they're kind of creepy and stalkerish, but when done well and done subtly, they can really have a huge return on your investment with a very low investment cost. I'm going to kind of skip through these, but video is a great way to drive awareness, very inexpensive. If you are selling online, obviously Amazon's a place you can go, eBay's a place you can go. We also love shopping ads when you do these through Google. Those are the ads that you'll see show up when somebody does a search that show the pictures, the title, pricing, might share reviews with them as well. Final thoughts, things that are important to keep in mind. Because we're late on this time, if you want to reach out and you want to really, I think, a good laugh, ask me about Lois Feldman. I'll get that. I want to get to stuff that's a little bit more relevant to you. My wife and I, for our 10th anniversary, went to Istanbul. And my wife's a great researcher. She's on the internet. She's looking stuff up. And she found something called the Other Tour. If you're going to Istanbul, I highly recommend that you take it. It was something started by a couple brothers. We had an amazing time on this. She found it because they ranked #1 on things to do in Istanbul on TripAdvisor. So I was really curious, and I asked them, I said, hey, how'd you guys get to #1? Well, what they did was they provided reviews to American backpackers. They said, provided tours to American backpackers and said, hey, if you take this tour, we'll do it for free. You don't have any cost associated with it. Other than your food and drinks you'll pay for, just on your own. All we ask is that you leave us a review on TripAdvisor. And then in a very short period of time, they get up to #1. Now, the cautionary aspect of this is you have to continue to deliver good service. So they had an issue where they had their younger brother started taking over and giving some of the tours. And he was a little irreverent. He would do things like make religious jokes to big groups of Baptist tours that were coming through. So as you imagine, that didn't go very well. They started to get negative reviews. Their rankings in TripAdvisor went down. So this is not a set and forget it. You need to constantly curate those reviews on whatever engines are important to you. The last thing I would mention in terms of a tactic, don't neglect email. And when we talked about in the SaaS space, having a great email drip campaign is absolutely critical to success. So have those people come in. They're a lot of times not going to buy from you right away. You're going to have to continue to follow up with them because you're going to be ignored or the timing's not right. So when you have that strategy of 7+ touches where you can continue to reach out to those people in an automated way that isn't taking up a lot of your time because you've set up the great logic behind it, that can have a really major impact over time for you. So please do not sleep on email. Some great resources you can do. We talked about the Google Ads Planner, Facebook, LinkedIn. Amazing folks, as you know, most of you on this call with the U.S. Commercial Service and with Western Pennsylvania Commission and their sister companies, their sister agencies all across the great the great Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. But the other thing I'd mention is the U.S. Commercial Service Market Diversification Tool. And so if you go to this, there's the link at the bottom, or you can do a Google search for it. You can actually give information about the products based on your code from the harmonized system and what markets you're going after. And it'll tell you which markets it believes you have the best opportunity in. It's a great tool. They also give you the reasons why they think it's such a great opportunity for you. Next steps. I would say if anybody has an interest, you want to follow up, please let me know. We're happy to talk with you, give you free advice. There are truly no strings attached to this. We just like seeing people export. It's one of my jobs sitting on the District Export Council to promote exporting in the United States. If you would be interested in potentially working with us, we'll give you an idea of a few different things we can do. The majority of our work is custom work that is based on what your needs are. So we build a customized program for you around any of the tactics we talked about today and some other related ones. Happy to talk with you more. We've also developed a few plans that will help you if you are new to exporting or if you're new to a particular market. So what we've put together is kind of an advertising entry plan. We've also put together a starter pack on the search engine optimization side of things. These are kind of to get you foundational work that'll be able to help you out. To give you a sense, I mean, these can range from anywhere from $7,500 to $15,000. They should be GAP eligible. That'd be something you'd have to apply to the state and be able to get approved for it. But they have been built with GAP grants in mind so that you can get a portion of that returned to you and really lessen your cost on that front. So I am up at time, 1 minute till. I will thank you everybody for your attention. I know we're going through this quickly to get through all our information. If people want to stick around, I'm happy to stick around and answer questions directly here. Otherwise, if you'd like to contact us afterwards, please feel free to reach out to me via my email. You can reach out through our website, connect with me on LinkedIn, and I'd love to stay in touch and help you in any way I can. Luke, are there any questions that are out there that we haven't addressed so far or didn't go into enough detail?
No, sir.
Okay, awesome. So I'll take a last call here. Looks like we might have 1 or 2 chats coming in. Might just be pleasantries, but if there's any questions, please ask now, and we'll be happy to stick on just for a couple of minutes. All right, I'm going to go ahead and turn off recording.
Oh,
sorry,
okay,
go ahead,
thank you, Justin. Thank you for everyone attending the event. And hopefully we all learned something interesting.
Cool. Thank you so much, Rena. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks.